You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Coming up on today's programme, making coal a thing of the past, an iconic chimney at Scotland's last plant powered by the fossil fuel comes crashing down. Why 30,000 trees could be felled this winter as global warming drives disease. And under the sea, how fish songs are helping researchers understand the health of coral reefs. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show where we track the changes happening to our world right now and challenge those coming up with the solutions. Now, an iconic chimney stack from Scotland's last remaining coal-fired power station has been demolished today. The Fife plant produced coal-fired energy until it ceased operating in 2016, but today's demolition was a symbolic part of the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. A warning, this report from our correspondent Milena Veselinovic contains some flash photography.
Scotland's last remaining coal power plant, consigned to history. The chimney at Longannet station has stood in Fife for 50 years, but today its demolition signalled the end of an era.
I think this is a really special day. It's a poignant day and it will no doubt generate mixed emotions for people who've worked in this site over 50 years. But it symbolises that transition Scotland is making away from fossil fuels to renewable, low-carbon sources of energy. It marks the definitive end of coal in Scotland, which is such an important moment.
It was a symbolic act.
One, fire.
Scotland has been coal-free since 2016, when Longannet was closed by Scottish Power.
A bit sad and emotional at this time just now. I've been here 39 years and sure you just said it's the end of an era.
But one of the biggest challenges was making sure that communities that were built around the fossil fuel industry don't get left behind.
One of the things that made me most proud of what we've done here is that overwhelmingly all of the people who wanted a new job, we found them a new career. We helped people who wanted to go and retire or to go and find careers elsewhere. And that's it's massively important that people, communities, the whole country feels like it's going in this transition.
Longannet once generated nearly half of Scotland's power. In its final act, it beamed warning stripes, showing the rise in temperature from 1850 to 2020, and a message urging a greener, more sustainable future. Milena Veselinovic, Sky News.
So, as Milena mentioned, Scotland has been coal-free since 2016, but the fossil fuel does still make up a small percentage of the electricity mix in Great Britain. And you can see on our data dashboard here that right now it accounts for around 4% of the mix, while 46% of electricity is coming from gas. We've got 25% coming from renewables, and we've got 11% there coming from nuclear. Well, joining me now is Julian Lewis, Head of Networks and Chief Engineer at the National Grid Electricity System Operator. Welcome to you. So how close is Britain to completely eliminating coal?
Pretty close, actually. As you've said, I mean, we're producing 4% now, but on average across this year and last year, coal is sort of around 1.5 to 1.6% of our total energy need, which is down 97% since 2012. So we've made tremendous progress here in the UK. And by October 2024, that will be the end of coal on the whole of the GB electricity system.
And yet we are still relying on fossil fuels through gas, aren't we? So how long is that going to be necessary?
So gas is a hugely flexible and transitional fuel. We have an ambition within the system operator that we'll have a few hours in 2025 where we'll be able to run the UK system without any fossil fuel generation whatsoever, so zero carbon. And obviously, as we heard at the Conservative Party conference a couple of weeks ago, that by 2035 we will have a zero carbon electricity system here in the UK.
So we can rely solely on renewables for our energy in the future. I mean, isn't there a worry about relying on the wind and the sun to do their bit all the time?
Sure, you need a diverse energy mix. And in the UK, we're very fortunate because we do have nuclear, we have some hydro, and we've got interconnection to mainland Europe as well. And just this autumn, actually, we commissioned one of the largest subsea cables in the world over to Norway and linking those two energy systems together. So more solutions like that, connecting us to our close neighbours, and building more storage, but also the flexibility. Consumers will have a much bigger role to play into the future. And although your daily life, you'll be able to go and do the normal things you do normally, you'll have a smart black box somewhere that's controlling actually when does the washing machine come on, when does your vehicle, your electric vehicle charge, etc. So huge flexibility will come forward to move the demand, the amount of electricity you consume, to when it's being generated by the renewable electricity.
Julian, Leslie, thanks very much indeed. So let's take a look at the day's other climate news now. And Russia recorded the second largest temperature difference for a single day in any country yesterday, according to the Met Office. Minus 61 degrees was recorded at Delyankir, while temperatures reached 24 degrees in Shatoy. That's a temperature difference of 85 degrees Celsius. New research published in the journal Nature has found hydropower developments are one of the major drivers of habitat loss for tigers. The dams create massive reservoirs which drown out the homes of the big cat species. 421 dams were damaging almost 14,000 square kilometres of tiger habitat in Asia, and a further 41 dams are planned in their territorial range. And Europe's largest living wall is set to be finished in 2023 as part of a 12-storey office development in Salford. Eden, designed and built by the English Cities Fund, will include 355,000 plants with the aim of removing toxins from the atmosphere. The £36 million building will also feature insect hotels and bird nesting boxes in an effort to increase biodiversity. The National Trust is warning that 30,000 trees will need to be felled this winter because of diseases made worse by climate change. The charity says there could be dramatic changes to the British countryside as milder, wetter winters and warmer summers caused by global warming are creating ideal conditions for diseases and pests to spread. As Sadia Chowdhury reports.
You could call this a pandemic. An invisible disease that's spreading fast among larch trees here in the Lake District. At the heart of one of the UK's top beauty spots, thousands of trees have already disappeared off the horizon.
2019, that was like a completely covered landscape with trees and, a full woodland. The scale of how many trees that we've actually lost in the last 3 years due to the Phytophthora ramorum.
The disease can kill a tree in weeks. It's detected using a lateral flow test, similar to what we use to test for COVID.
So from this one tree, this one location, everything within 300 metres has to be killed. So if we get a scattering of trees there over the woodland, the whole woodland can go. And that's what's happened here.
Over in the Peak District, another disease. Ash trees infected with ash dieback have to be removed, and it's costing millions of pounds. It's estimated that up to 95% of the UK's ash trees will be lost in the next 20 to 30 years. There is no solution to this problem. Foresters simply have to start from scratch and plant new trees.
We need to be thinking about the new treescapes that we want for Britain and what those treescapes should look like, building into them some resilience so that they cope with climate change, so that they deal with some of the issues that are facing us.
The National Trust has carried out extensive felling of larches here over the last 4 years, and it's still taking place.
Larches are useful trees. Not only are their barks highly resistant to decay, but they also drop their needles, which means sunlight can come through right onto the forest floor, where other species can thrive. And where there are rows of larches, they also provide crucial protection to other, weaker trees in the path of a storm.
When Storm Arwen hit this area last week, these trees crashed into a lakeside holiday park. The National Trust says it may have lost tens of thousands of trees last weekend. The few remaining ones are left exposed and pose a risk to human life. They may also now have to be cut down. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News, in Windermere in the Lake District.
Fish songs are helping show the success of a coral reef restoration project in Indonesia. Researchers have found that underwater noises are a sure sign of a healthy, diverse soundscape and can be used alongside visual observations to monitor these vital ecosystems. So let's have a listen.
Fish being silent is actually one of the biggest lies that anyone's ever been told. They make loads of different types of noise. Coral reefs in particular are the noisiest ecosystems in the sea. By contrast, when a reef is degraded, it sounds very quiet because none of the life is there. What we did in this study was to go to somewhere where they had for years and years been regrowing the coral and trying to rebuild the ecosystem in that way. And for the first time, we were able to test whether that regrowing of the coral had rebuilt the whole ecosystem, whether all those noisy animals had come back or not. And to our delight, we found that they had. But I think what this gives us is a real encouragement that if we can get rid of the problems facing coral reefs, it will be possible to rebuild reefs that have been damaged.
Amazing stuff. Do stay tuned. Coming up after the break, I'll be joined by Dr. Cici Hu from the University of Oxford's Environmental Change Institute and Richard Black, Senior Associate at the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. And we're going to be discussing phasing out fossil fuels and if we need to do more to protect nature-based solutions.
Of course, predicting fertility is something that's really difficult, but we employ about 20% of our employees are over 50, and we expect to have a really good uptake on this policy. We've only just launched the policy, so we've got Shelley, our colleague, who's going to be taking her first leave this month, and she's super excited about it. As we announced this to our colleagues, it was really well received by our grandparents, by our parents, and by our younger colleagues. So we're very positive about the difference this could make. We've done lots of research here at Saga about this, and colleagues are telling us that flexibility is really important for them. And of course, in this generation of over 50s, often they're looking after their children, their grandchildren, and sometimes looking after their parents too. So statements like this are really important as a responsible employer and around age. We hope not to be unique for too long. We think we're the first in the UK, if not in the world, to do this. But of course, we would love more employers to follow this because we recognise that being an age-friendly employer is simply the right thing to do. And of course, having more experienced colleagues helps us serve our more experienced customers. So it adds some real value to our business. Well, we think it's simply about being the right thing to do. We need to attract and retain more colleagues into our workplace. And as you said, people are going to be working longer. So well-being for all organisations is a really important priority. And for us, grandparents' leave is part of that.
I love my job because I get to do something that is contributing to a better future.
Did you know if we use less energy, we can reduce air pollution? Like turning off the lights? Yep.
Friday will start cold and showery with a patchy frost, but eastern Britain will be mainly dry. Ireland, Northern Ireland and Western Britain will see showers through the morning, some heavy with hail and thunder and hill snow possible. Much of eastern Scotland and eastern England will stay dry and sunny. It'll be cold and windy for all. The afternoon will be similar, but the showers will ease going into the evening. Low air pollution levels are expected again, measuring just 2 or 3 on the daily air quality index.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Now we're getting straight to discussing the climate issues of the day now with Dr. Cece Hu from the University of Oxford's Environmental Change Institute and Richard Black, Senior Associate at the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. So good to see you both. Good evening. So let's talk about the spectacular pictures today of Scotland's last coal-fired power station being demolished. And coal is very close to complete extinction, in fact, in the UK. But this country, like most others, continues to rely on other fossil fuels, mainly oil and gas, for energy. But there's pressure to reduce that in a bid to cut emissions and slow climate change. And this week's the UK's oil and gas strategy was challenged in court by campaigners. And Richard, what was this court case all about? And is litigation generally likely to have some sort of influence on speeding up our transition towards renewables, do you think?
Yes, this court case was brought by a group called Paid to Pollute. And the basis of their case is that basically, if you look at the way that the oil and gas industry intersects with the Treasury, some years it ends up paying tax net to the Treasury. Other years it ends up taking tax net from the Treasury. So the plaintiffs in this case are basically arguing that in the years when it actually receives money, this is a perverse incentive. Effectively, it's paying oil companies to get stuff out of the ground. At the very time when scientists and various other analyses are basically saying we shouldn't be getting so much oil and gas out of the ground. In fact, we shouldn't be doing any more exploration and development if we are just to have, enough fossil fuels that can keep us below the 1.5 Celsius limit. So they had the hearing yesterday, and we should be getting a judgment maybe tomorrow, maybe in a week or two.
And Richard, briefly, I mean, there are court cases around the world. Are they making a difference to government policies?
I think some have made a big difference. The big one was the Urgenda court case brought up against the Dutch government a couple of years back, which really forced the government to accelerate its carbon cutting pledges. But often the court cases raise publicity about an issue, and that can be as useful in the long run as actually winning. And that, I think, is probably the case with this Paid to Pollute one that we're seeing. The subsidy regime is quite murky, and this will I think, shine some light upon it.
Cece, what do you think? Do you think that this is basically down to governments making decisions about transitioning away from fossil fuels, or can other influences be important, like public pressure, for example?
Yeah, I think these cases are a perfect demonstration of people power, right? I think people power can be very strong and effective. But the challenge that we face is how can we scale people power? I think basically we don't just want one successful case or two successful cases. We want lots of cases and lots of individual actions. And the trouble with that is that, it's hard to scale people power. But I think one of the key issues that we need to address in this challenge is that we need to really make this mental linkage between climate change, which is a very abstract concept, with individual lives. And, how does climate change reduce food on your tables? How does climate change stop your children from going to school? Once every individual has made that mental link, I mean, I struggle with it sometimes too, even after studying climate change for so many years. Once people have made that mental link between that abstract concept and their daily lives, then they can make really individual changes. They can lobby their organizations, they can lobby their workplaces, they can lobby their governments.
Okay.
So I think
sorry to cut you off, Cece, but just a quick word on that issue with Richard, because the government might say, well, yes, but we need to worry about energy security. That relates to people. They might worry about getting a steady supply of electricity. People in the fossil fuel industry will worry about their jobs. I mean, people can relate to that too. The transition has to be managed carefully, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And we've seen examples, of course, in the UK of how not to do it with the phase out of coal mining going back several decades. That was a really disruptive and very unfair transition. Germany, Chile, other countries are moving off of coal via other routes, basically consultations with mining communities, working out what support they need in order to get through this. But I think it's also important to look at the overall scale of likely job losses. If you compare the size of the workforce in the UK oil and gas industry, for example, it's nothing compared with the number of workers in retail who've lost their jobs over the last 10, 20 years as online retailing has become a thing. So yes, let's have a transition, and a just transition, but actually really let's make it a genuine transition.
OK, let's move on to our next topic. And earlier in the show, we heard how some traditional trees could disappear from the British countryside forever as changing weather patterns are creating ideal conditions for diseases to spread. The National Trust says it's trying to build woodlands that are more resilient to our changing climate. But is enough being done to protect the world's natural solutions? And Cece, I know you've done a lot of work on adaptation. I mean, how important a role can nature play in those projects trying to mitigate against the effects of climate change?
Yeah, sure. So there are many nature-based solutions, such as one can build rain gardens or green roofs or permeable roads, and these are roads basically that absorb a lot of water. So in terms of, I'd actually like to highlight an initiative which is happening in China right now, which is a country that I study quite a bit. The government has launched a 1 trillion investment in this initiative called the Sponge City Initiative, but basically it's finding new ways of building city surfaces and roads which will absorb water that stops from floods, and it's like a new way of kind of constructing cities. And by 2030, the government is actually aiming to have 80% of its urban areas to be sponge-like. So these cities will absorb water, flood water, in essence, very quickly. And there are some preliminary results that are showing that the investment in these kind of resilience programs are yielding up to 20 times investment returns. So it's really worth investing in this kind of resilient programs because they give you a lot of avoided damages.
Cece, very briefly, I mean, we were hearing about the National Trust warning about diseases in trees. The problem is, though, that climate change might affect some of those nature-based solutions, mightn't they? Very briefly, if you can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, trees are very, the lungs of the planets, right? We need to protect them. So I think one nature-based solution is to not kind of plant more trees. And in fact, a study has shown if you plant 1 trillion trees, we can have the potential to save the planet, at least to keep our, global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. It has the potential to destroy, but we need to protect trees.
OK, very quickly, Richard, I mean, obviously nature plays a big part in mitigating against the effects of climate change, but it can be affected deeply by it as well.
Yes, and we need to understand that for all kinds of reasons. We rely upon nature, for a lot of the food that we eat. We rely on, we need healthy soil, we need insect pollinators and all of these things. We know that wildlife is shifting its ranges and in response to climate change, we need to understand that and adapt to it because basically we need to, humanity to be able to survive well, in the nature of 40, 50 years' time as well as it does now.
We're out of time. I'm so sorry to keep cutting in. We were short of time, but Cece and Richard, always good to talk to you both. Thanks very much indeed. And do stay with us. Sky News Tonight is up next, and a panel of experts will be answering all your questions about the new Omicron variant of COVID-19. Thanks for watching. See you next time.